What's up, everybody? It's Ivan with Trouts Fly Fishing, back with your bi-weekly fishing report and forecast for May 9th. We are officially, I'm going to call it, we're officially in runoff. We're in the beginning of runoff. We've seen some cooler weather over the last week up in the mountains, and some of the rivers have sort of flattened out, namely the Colorado. The Arkansas has remained pretty steady as well, but we're seeing bumps and flows on the Eagle and on the Roaring Fork. So, spring runoff's here. There's still opportunities to fish, obviously, the tailwaters, and there'll be seasonal opportunity or periods to fish those freestones as well. You just have to time it right and pay attention to the hydrograph, pay attention to weather, but there's some good opportunities to be had for sure. So, without further ado, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. I will mention, as an aside, this will be the only bi-weekly fishing report and forecast for May. I'm going to Cuba. It's my first trip to the saltwater, like true, real flats fishing trip. I'm obviously super excited. Mostly there to take video and photos, but hopefully I'll get a shot at messing up a tarpon or two. By messing up, I don't mean like catching. I mean I'll probably not catch them. So. But if I do, that'd be cool. If I don't, less cool. Still cool, but less cool. Anyways, let's start with the freestones. So the Colorado, as I mentioned, has steadied out. Dropped quite a bit of flow in the last week or so with the cooler weather that we've had. That's a good opportunity in that middle Colorado, upper Colorado sections to fish. There's still going to be color in the water, but there's not going to be nearly as much as you'd see when water is rising. And typically during these times, throwing golden stones, caddis, big stoneflies, worms, leeches. Someone told me it's leech season all the time. Ben, if you're listening, I agree. Anyway, caddis, leeches, Pat's rubber legs, big golden stones. You'll still see blue wings playing a role, so those are good nymphs to throw. But fish will also rise in dirty water, so be prepared with dry flies. I know I've made that mistake a time or two where I've dedicated my day to stripping streamers, and out of nowhere you'll just see a fish rising in slow water, eating caddis and blue wings. So this is really a time to have all your fly boxes, be prepared for all water conditions, and pay attention to the hydrographs for sure. Obviously, when flow starts getting up, I sort of treat freestones during runoff like I would treat freestones during winter, and it's obviously not the same water type, but you're looking for slower water that's adjacent to fast water. Generally, I don't like the recirculators. I like it when it's sort of moving downstream as well. It's just an easier drift, and I think fish, you get them to eat better in those types of water. But finding the slower water and working that stuff, and once you find one fish, generally you're going to find more. And that's where I see the biggest parallel is between winter fishing and runoff fishing. Is once you find one, try to find them all, because they're all most likely going to be holding in that type of that water specifically, or that type of water. And so you want to keep running that specific drift, maybe adding some variation into it, but generally once you find one, you can find quite a few, and when you do, that's the reward and payoff is pretty high. Streamers are obviously going to be a factor when you have dirty water, so I obviously big fan of throwing black streamers. I know some people like olive. I don't know why, but they do. Those people can throw olive if they want. I also like throwing, a little bit of yellow, and then anything with a little bit of sparkle, a little bit of flash to it. So black with flash tends to do pretty well for me as well. All right, let's talk about the Arkansas. It's holding pretty steady. It looks like it's going to hold pretty steady for the next week, maybe 2 weeks. There's a little bit of color in the water around Salida and Wellsville, but we're seeing caddis. We're seeing, still seeing blue wings, especially on days like this, overcast days. Those can be some of the best days on the Arkansas when you get into a good blue wing hatch. So caddis are here. obviously your fly choices should reflect that. Sizzling hotspot squirrels, guys choice hare's ears, dirty birds, chartreuse, what are those? Just the caddis, I can't remember what they're called, but like electric caddis, caddis larvas, and then blue wings, your standard blue wings, nothing crazy there, bar emergers, shot glass batis will always be effective on the Arkansas. But be ready with dry flies, be ready with small streamers, because we're seeing some pretty steady flows there right now. One thing I should mention is that below Coaldale, that canyon below Coaldale, dumps a bunch of sediment into the river because of the last year's fire. So below Coaldale, you'll generally see it being pretty off color and pretty difficult to fish down there. But fishing can be pretty productive above that. So the Roaring Fork and the Eagle have both bumped and will probably continue to bump. So those are less fishable right now. If you want to fish those, generally the edges with big patch rubber legs, big streamers, finding those sort of cushions off the edge of a bank, that can always be effective. So let's talk about tailwaters. Decker's bumped to like 350 last week and now has started to drop. I think it's down to 215 at the time of this taping, and it's the afternoon of Wednesday the 7th or 8th or whatever day we're on. So with that drop, we had a false start on big bug season. Still, definitely fish scuds, still definitely fish leeches, fish a big bug in front, fish a crane fly in front, but we're sort of returning to having opportunities for good dry fly action with caddis and blue wings when the conditions are right. And we're sort of into there's actually a really good flow for finding feeding fish from riffles. So I know I was talking to Scotty D, our head guide here in Denver, and he mentioned that when the flow was, before they bumped it, the fish were holding in riffles really well and eating extraordinarily well. So I, like Scott, like when fish get in the riffles, generally stupider. Generally, they have to make a decision on a fly pretty quick, and if you get the presentation right, they usually make the wrong decision for them and the right decision for you. So that's a good thing for Deckers. I fished the Dream Stream on Monday. It's flowing at like 88. I'm sure that's going to bump over the next month or so. I mean, I would assume so. There's going to be water coming down. I would assume they're going to bump it eventually. With the flows as they are, I had good eats on leeches, black and brown Myers mini leech. I also had good eats on, I think it's the Z or X-wing caddis in riffles. So, found some fish feeding in riffles right off of the drop-offs, sort of in those indentations on flats. Found some fish there, and that was super productive. Didn't see any dry flies, but those can happen when the conditions are right on the Dream. 11 miles sort of stayed steady. It's going to be sort of the same dose of flies there as well. Still waters are always a really good option, especially this time of year with a lot of our, still waters opening. I know I just made the fishing report last week, or no, it was I can't remember. Dates are weird. Anyway, Spinney just opened, 11 Mile is open, Antero is open. They all opened like at the end of April, beginning of May. All reports from those fisheries is you can hang chironomids, leeches, scuds, worms, and find fish. Just gotta find the windward side, or the where the wind is sort of coming to. That's the weirdest way to say that. Fish with the wind in your face. Pushes the food towards you. Fish follow the food. Fish eat your flies. You catch the fish. That's generally good, right? I like catching fish. Fish are cool. Better than not catching fish. So, yep. Stillwater's good option this time of year. May, with the weather that's been forecasted, doesn't look like it's going to get super hot, so we're not going to see a really big, huge bump. We're obviously going to see a rising trend, but it's not going to be a huge bump in flows. We're going to see some nights that are below freezing, and that's going to level those rivers out a bit and provide a little fishable windows. So it looks like we're gonna. I don't want to make bold predictions, but it looks like from the weather that we're expecting, obviously that can change. It's Colorado, it's the world, like weather changes. You can't just forecast out months in advance, but with the next 2 to 3 weeks that I've been forecasted, if it holds that way, you would assume that I would assume that our runoff is going to be a gradual one. So we're going to see a gradual peak, and then depending on what the water or what the air temperatures do, once it peaks, I don't really care, honestly. Once it peaks and it starts dropping consistently, you can find fish. You just have to find the right water type. So yeah, fishing's good. Just have to game plan a little bit different than you would in the summer months, where the flow's a little bit more consistent, but it's not a bad thing. This is a time of year when a lot of big fish come out of hiding and become a little bit easier to catch. So, with big rewards this time of year. If you guys have any questions, give us a shout in the shop. You know where to find us. Here in Denver, up in Frisco, on the internet, on the YouTubes. Yeah. Okay, bye.